Hey folks, welcome back to another episode. Today we're talking about breaking energetic bonds and reopening love after divorce. This is a unique topic and I'm really excited to talk about it. With me today is my guest, Joanna Shakti. Hi, Joanne.
Hello. Super excited to spend time with you.
Yeah, me too. Just to lay a foundation here, divorce doesn't just end with the paperwork. Even after complete physical and legal separation, many of us still feel the energetic pull of our ex, sometimes even years later. Those lingering connections can keep you stuck in pain, block us from love, and even sabotage future relationships. Today, Joanne, known as the Soul Love Mentor and the founder of Ecstasy Intimacy, is joining us. She's smart, sexy, and just a little bit spicy. And she's going to talk about this blend of spiritual awakening, masculine, feminine dynamic, leadership training, and even maybe a little Tantra. And she helps singles and couples break free from old patterns and open to soul relationships. I love how that sounds, filled with intimacy and joy. So, in our conversation, we're going to talk about how to fully detach from your ex, how to reopen your heart after disappointment and betrayal, and how to avoid repeating the same mistakes when it comes to love. And we all want to know how to do that. Joanne also shares wisdom on what intimacy and ecstasy truly mean, which may be different than what you think, and gives special advice to high achieving men and women who are looking for real love the second time around. So, with no further ado, you can read more about the show and Joanne in the show notes, but we're going to go ahead and dive right in. Joanne, so excited for this conversation.
Really excited. It's such an important topic, and there's so much pain around this. So, yeah, I am here to serve and to hopefully create space for healing and the real possibilities of love.
Yeah, and there's going to be a lot of listeners who are thinking, I'm not even ready to listen about the possibility of love. And so for you, I want to say there's something in today's conversation for everyone. So stay tuned in and let's talk about that piece early on where we do close our hearts. Like it's this self protective thing. And so let's start there. Can you talk a little bit about what that means, how it changes us, or how it changes the way we interact?
Yeah, absolutely, Karen. And there's something you said to the people that say, I don't know if I'm ready for love again. I would say, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Like, if somebody is saying, I don't know if I'm ready for love again, that's actually a potent place to be. I actually think that sometimes the strategies are let me get back out there, and we don't actually pay attention to the bonds that are still tying us to this, the reactivity that we have to anything that might resemble that, and the protection that comes up. So the preparation, the transition from that completion of the divorce to the next step. It's different timing for each person, but there's some really important things there. And getting the completion that is energetic, what you asked for this topic to be about, is critical because the paperwork and the physicality really mean nothing when it comes to the future.
Yeah.
What?
And then the other thing that we're dealing with is the children. And
Yes.
so while we're ending an intimate romantic relationship, the vast majority of clients have children, whether they're still living at home or they're adult children. And so there are all of these ties, all of these opportunities for triggers and trauma and reactivity. And so I think you mentioned the word completion. Let's talk about what is that from your perspective going through this transition?
I love that. And the completion. And it ties into the very first thing that you spoke about is the walls of protection that get built, the resentments that are often still carried, the pain and the betrayal that's still lodged in the body. And so in our work, as we've started to rebuild the relationship with ourselves, which, oh, by the way, is the most important thing we can do, is what's happening here. Because the strength of the relationship with ourselves determines the strength of the relationship we can have with anyone else. As one of those core steps in rebuilding the relationship with ourselves is to do what I call conscious endings rituals. And those conscious endings rituals have components of the acknowledgement of the pain. Because if we're going through a divorce, I don't care if we chose it, I don't care what happened, we're in pain. And our society tells us to avoid our pain, to stuff it, get over it, get back out there, forget about it, time will heal. No, time just buries it.
Yeah.
And then it comes raging out in a moment when it can actually cause great harm to ourselves and anything that we're wanting to create and the person that we might want to be creating it with. So acknowledging the emotional pain, giving space in a conscious way, a conscious environment to say, I'm freaking pissed. I'm heartbroken. I don't trust. I feel betrayed. And there's a myriad of ways that that can show up. And oh, by the way, often our patterns that we're playing out in our adult relationships have a reflection of the stories we were already telling ourselves as younger beings. And so recognizing some of those pattern dynamics so we can tend to those. So the emotional piece is first. Eventually, it is also the expressions of what we contributed, because it always takes two. So while we need to empty out our pain and we need in consciousness to be heard in that, then we also want to look at what's our responsibility. And there's more subtle steps in here, but I'm giving you the high level for our conversation is what was my part? Because most of the time we're pointing over there
Completely.
and not acknowledging that I had a role in this. And so there's part two. Now I'm going to turn it over to you and I'll keep going, but
Well,
stop there.
on that last point, the statistics are around 50% for first marriage divorces, 67 for second marriage divorces, 73% for third marriage divorces. And to your point, so many people feel like they're divorcing the problem or the problematic person. And so we absolutely have to emotionally empty. I want to talk about how do you do that while you're on the battlefield of divorce. And then that's what Journey Beyond Divorce is all about. If you are not willing to look in the mirror, look at the baggage you brought to the table, the coping mechanisms, the fears, the judgments, the insecurities, the unforgivenesses, the experiences from your family of origin, then you're bound to rinse and repeat because you're actually operating based on an unconscious blueprint. So I am hearing you say emotionally empty, look at your own part. So let's keep going with what your pieces are, and then we'll dive into each.
Yeah. So the emotionally emptying, being witnessed in that. Now we can do it on our own, but it's often really important to be witnessed. And in all of this, I actually encourage being witnessed. And then that acknowledgement of my part. And then there's a space. We don't have to do conscious endings with that person. Someone can stand in for that person. We can do them energetically with their soul. There's lots of ways we can do this because, especially if it's high conflict, there's no way that other person's going to be involved. And it doesn't matter. But we might also create a space to acknowledge their perspective, which goes along with seeing our part, imagining how they could have been hurt, imagining how they could have struggled, so that we can begin to see that, because all of this begins to lead to a core forgiveness process.
Yeah, that's the big F word.
It is the big F word. And yeah.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So I like that you're saying that the conscious ending and the being witnessed does not require that somebody who has hurt and abused you consciously witness and hear, right? So that's really, really important, because I think so many feel stuck in, I can never get past this because, and yet my mom passed away a couple of years ago. I had a challenging relationship with her, and I actually had to come to a conscious ending without her here. And so I went through that process, and that was really interesting to be able to do that, being witnessed by somebody else. I'm going to just bat it back to you to continue.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that eventual forgiveness, and if we can't forgive, it just means something else has to happen. And how do we tend to our emotional body, our mental body, sometimes our physical body, until we can get to that place of forgiveness? Because that is the place where the old falls away, the walls of protection can fall away, and we become available for intimacy. We become available for connection again. And then with that forgiveness, then we'll actually become, well, self-forgiveness. So let's also be honest about that, is that we have to have the self-forgiveness in there.
Yeah.
And then eventually the prayers for goodness. And I say the word prayers, but it's blessings, it's acknowledgement, it's seeing the human in the one who, through their own pain, brought pain, and through our pain, brought pain, and that we can offer an opening through, whether we call it a prayer, a blessing, an acknowledgement, so that now you go your way, I go my way, and we have the space energetically. And often there's an energetic process of cutting ties energetically, and vow clearing processes, because we made vow clearing processes that we also want to do. Because those vows, when we take on vows, especially marriage vows, anything where we're witnessed, those are lodged, they live in our body. And so to just think that what we said in that marriage ceremony isn't having an impact just because there's a divorce piece of paper. No, we have to tend to and complete with those vows and any belief systems that we picked up along the way. So there's several steps in that process so that we are liberated to be available to what's meant for us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. When I listen to you and I think about my own journey, and I came from a high conflict situation, the thought of forgiving him was impossible. And I remember sitting there and thinking, the problem I'm having is I can forgive him for everything he did. But today he's going to do it again. And next week he's going to do it again. And then he's going to do it again. And this is hurting the kids and it's hurting me. And so how do I get to forgiveness when I'm in the midst of this like 10-year, really difficult parallel parenting? And I'm watching my 16-year-old come home, 6 foot, 200 pounds, throwing himself on the floor, crying his eyes out because he's gotten crushed by dad one more time. So I'm giving you, my situation is,
Yeah, no, it's, yeah.
and a lot of my
Mhm.
clients have extreme situations. And so I always feel like we have to speak to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you in the introduction brought in the spiritual path and why we walk the paths that we do. I can't tell you exactly, but I feel like there's a soulful alignment for each of us, that we come in with things we are meant to grow through and learn from, and that growth actually takes us into our greatest soul expression. We might call that ecstasy. It's an actual complete twist on the association of ecstasy with sexuality, which sure, we can talk about that, but there is for each of us an ecstasy of soul, an ecstasy of being. And I'll pair three things together: the lessons, the greatest joys, the greatest ecstasies, and then the contributions that we get to make. And they all come in my world through who is this being uniquely. And so as you describe that circumstance, that there was a version of that in my own world, and my mom having to witness us coming home in tears through dad and new stepmom and all of that. And so We do, as parents, often live through that. And so this is why I bring in the spiritual, and we don't have to call it spiritual path, but there's some path that we're on. There's something greater than us. And we can fight those circumstances. And if we fight them, I would imagine I'll project. And my mom fought it. And God bless her, that was the best she knew how to do. But if we fight it, if we're angry about it, which we can be, we just maybe don't process it with the kids. But are you as available for those kids when you're so angry at the spouse? Are the kids getting what they need?
That you just nailed it. And that's the key. I actually found my way from unforgiveness to pity, which is kind of compassion wrapped in oodles of judgment.
Yep. Perfect
And
definition.
I was like, oh, pity. I'm heading in the right direction, but I haven't quite nailed it yet.
Yeah.
And I think I went from pity to more forgiveness to compassion to actually being able to pray for him. And in my case, my ex had gotten very, very sick and nobody wanted to have anything to do with him. And I was able to step in and be the support he needed. And that was incredibly hard. But I think that I had gotten to the place where this is a human being and nobody deserves to walk this path all alone. And I have the capacity to support him. And for all of you listening, I'm 19 years post-divorce. This did not happen fast. It did not happen in the first few years. Like this was my kids were actually emancipated when that part happened. So I'd gone through 10 years of co-parenting, but I think it's so important to bring in that spiritual piece because, and this might be a little bit of a tangent, but I know with every ounce of my being that my son and daughter were born to their dad and me for a very specific reason. And even though we might be on opposite ends of a spectrum right now, their life path involved every struggle, every joy. And I think that when you can trust and believe in that, and it's sometimes hard in the thick of the crisis, but that opens something that has its own energetic opening, doesn't it?
10,000%. And I think while we're in the thick of the crisis, we are on the journey. We just don't really realize it. Every one of those things that we move through is part of the eventual opening, the eventual letting go. So while we can't see the forest for the trees when we're in it, it's still part of the journey. And every one of those pieces planted a seed to what's next. But we can't get to what's next without walking every step of the path. And now you work, my work, those that are holding love in hearts, we can help make that path maybe a little faster, a little less painful, but we're still going to have to walk the path and go through the experiences.
And I think it's that trusting in
Yes.
unfolding, which I will bring the faith word in, not in a religious way, but having faith in the unfolding, having faith in our children being unique, intelligent, connected to divine people themselves with their own path and their own challenges and their own promises. And I think one of my favorite sayings, Joanna, is hold it loosely.
Yes.
Holding my children loosely, holding my business loosely, holding my anger or frustration or unforgiveness loosely so that it can flow.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And as we're holding it loosely, it actually can walk its path. When we fight it, we are shutting down and making everything slower and harder. And that is to be in the thick of it and in those most painful, challenging moments and to watch kids having their hearts broken, but then be able to come up and see they're walking that path. And can that begin to soften the anger? Can it soften the heartbreak so that we have space to connect with our higher expression, whatever that is, higher power, higher self, higher consciousness, the divine, holding all of that in service to not just ourselves, but the children, to potentially the past partner, because the kids are still connected. And on some level, we are until we're not. And so every bit of the journey, human and divine, if we can pull that in and trust, I will tell you, I am actually working on a memoir right now of that journey and the impact of my parents' divorce, and among many other things. But I could not sit here today, and I could not have done the work that I've done for the last 20 years without having those experiences that I had. It was absolutely critical in this development, in this soul's journey of learning and ecstasy and contribution.
100%. And so often it appears that the high conflict person is quote unquote winning. And I say, the fat lady hasn't sung yet. You're in the middle of the story and you're trying to put an exclamation point on the ending. It's not the ending. And yet it's so hard. My divorce was 3.5 years. I have one client who just crested 15, client who crested 10, a whole bunch who are knocking on 5. So it's a very long and arduous journey. And yet I've had clients whose divorce came and went and happened in 3 months. And these poor people, their heads were spinning, their life had changed, and they didn't actually have enough time to process it. And so I like to believe that however long an individual's divorce is taking is because that's what's meant to be. And there are all of the milestones and posts along the way.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I'm working with someone who's actually in one of my programs that's in a high conflict divorce. And just his pain. Yesterday, we were just speaking. And so seeing that, and the truth is, we don't have control.
We have control over one thing.
Yes.
And I'm always encouraged. It's like you do have control over one thing in a process that's painfully out of your control. So that's home.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And the idea, even, I'll call it kind to people, because I know my own inner judge has said, well, I can control myself. I can control my responses, but I can't always. I can't always. And I think that's another place that we have to have compassion, is that we can sometimes see the higher road and we can't always in the moment get to it.
100%.
And that path towards the higher road,
Yeah.
but to be able to go, I can't, I'm not controlling my emotions in this moment. Now let's do that in an environment, not on the kids, not where we're going to harm ourselves or anybody else. But right now, I'm in the contraction. And creating space to honor, I'm in the contraction.
Yeah.
And that's also really powerful, because we also have to give space to the kids to have their contractions. And if we can do it for ourselves, then we can do it for them. And nobody's wrong in their contractions. And if we allow them, they lead us to that higher road of love, if you will.
I think that there are so many leaps of faith along the way. And we could actually spend the entire conversation on this healing piece, but what I would love to do is take a quick sponsor break and then come back and talk about what you're inviting the listener into on the other side of the healing, because I think that that's equally as important and spectacular.
Sounds great.
So for listeners who are interested in learning more about your healing work, we're going to have an opportunity at the end to find out how they can do that. When you're working with someone and they've gotten to that point where they've released, they've connected the dots to their part, and they're feeling like, okay, I'm clear. I think this thing I'm feeling is an open heart. Take us from that point and what happened.
Yeah. So I'm going to actually give a little bit of the
The
framework
bridge.
of, the bridge. So what you're describing in that first part is what I describe as ecstatic authenticity. So going back to this idea that the strength of the relationship with you determines the strength of the relationship with another. Because some of the things that contribute, Margaret Paul actually was I was talking about this in our programs, and then somebody brought me one of Margaret Paul's articles like 12 years ago. And Margaret Paul is a therapist who had worked with, as she described it in that article, couples for 40 years. And that, in her words, the number one thing that caused a break in relationships was actually self-abandonment. Self-abandonment. And that self-abandonment is what breeds resentment and disconnection. And so often that is because we don't feel worthy. We don't want to be that guy. We don't want to be that woman. We don't want to be needy. We don't want to be high maintenance. We don't want to be too demand. All the stories. There's a zillion of them. And so this reconnection, because if we self-abandon, we will be in resentment. We will be in bitterness. We will be in disconnection. Different levels, different times. But that's a guarantee if we don't have a good relationship with ourselves. So the first part of the journey that we're talking about is this coming to know who you are, your needs, your wants, your desires, your turn-ons, your turn-offs, your boundaries, your deal breakers, your values, your places that what really matters. And then also to know our, what I'll call our light and our shadow. We all have our unconsciousness. We all do the things that we wish we didn't do. But if we can honor that and be willing to be seen in what I'll call our beauty and our mess, our strength and our weakness, our power and our vulnerability, at that moment, when we're willing to be seen in the wholeness of who we are, the good, the bad, and the ugly, it is the first moment that we're truly available for love. It's the first moment that we'll actually trust love. Because as long as there is a part of us that we are hiding, we won't trust that they actually love us. And so this is the first part of the journey that we're talking about is I don't want to be anyone but me. And I'm no longer willing to settle, sell out, twist myself into a pretzel, self-abandon, or anything else in favor of love connection, love or connection. So now that moves us into where I think you were inviting, but I wanted to set that first stage is now the ecstatic intimacy.
Yeah, and I want to put a bow around that. So, it's so often in my community, it's like we all came from the same family where people pleasing, codependent, conflict avoidant, perfectionist, hard on ourselves, self-abandoning human beings. And years ago, when my divorce first started, I read something that said, I need to reparent myself. I need to give my inner child what my mom and dad were not capable of giving me. But even more important, if I've been abandoned in relationships, it's only because I've been self-abandoning. And once I come home, you said it so beautifully, see and love all parts of me, I am now living in self-commitment. And when I commit to myself, I energetically attract people who commit to me. And so I just wanted to kind of wrap that because what you just said was so perfect. And when you get, and this is, folks, this is the work. This is why I invite you to roll up your sleeves, to engage with a therapist, with me, with someone like Joanna, and do that deep work, because it's not the piece of paper, it's not the settlement, it is this piece that truly liberates you for the rest of your life. And so when people get to that point, talk about the path ahead and the beauty and possibility.
Oh, yes. So ecstatic authenticity sets the stage for ecstatic intimacy. And that's the place where we meet heart to heart, body to body, soul to soul, masculine to feminine. We haven't talked about that, but it's another piece that I see that plays such an important role. And in this meeting, when we come together as souls, we come together, how I'll define soulmate, if you will, is that we arrived in each other's lives for the evolution of each other's souls. And that's exquisite, but it is not without struggle. And that's the thing you talked about, conflict avoidance. It's another piece that when we avoid conflict, we bury all of that and separate. All right, and it just, the space between us gets bigger and bigger. So in this phase, we're learning how to honor self, honor other and navigate conflict and our reactions and our saboteurs and our egos and our wounded kids and all that stuff in a way that actually strengthens and deepens the relationship, where we start to go, wow, I didn't know it could be this way. And that's actually the moment. Then interestingly, we talked about the willingness to be seen as the transition from, or trusting ourselves, which I didn't say is the transition from authenticity to intimacy. The transition from intimacy, ecstatic intimacy, to ecstatic ecstasy is our willingness to surrender, our willingness to trust the universe. And when we will trust the universe, ecstatic ecstasy is a life and a lovemaking that takes our breath away time and time and time again. And
Wow.
it's a capacity to relate, to partner consciously, but not without friction. That's the illusion. Real love is not without friction. Soulmate connection is not without friction. But the wholer we are in ourselves, the more we navigate that, brings us closer, takes our breath away. And I love, it's my favorite line when people go, I had no idea it could be this good. Yes, that. Yes, that.
I love that. Walk us through, just like you did in the beginning, what are the steps when you've gotten to that point, you've gotten over the bridge? What are the steps that you take people through that help them get from one of those phases to the next?
Yeah. So there are really in those first two phases, the authenticity and the intimacy, the being and the relating, the wholeness and the partnership. Those pieces were really dancing hand in hand. And so I often say when people are in that first phase of the work, it's 80% self, 20% relating. And then as we flip to the second, it's 80% relating, 20% self. Now we could say 70-30, but that's the concept. And so there are core pieces or elements that are actually about embodiment, not understanding, but living and breathing the self, living and breathing the truth of relational dynamics. So, one of the steps that is part of this journey is understanding for most relationships, regardless of our orientation, regardless of our genders, most relationships have a masculine and feminine dynamic to them. Masculine is the penetrating, generative, make things happen energy. It's a very vertical energy. It's a very focused energy. It's a very results oriented energy, is often partnered with the feminine energy, which I could talk for an entire week on this topic. So please, listeners, know I am doing this at the
You're getting the
tiniest
crib
bit of
notes, not even the crib notes.
not even the crib notes. But the feminine, the creative, the expressive, the tender, the sensitive, the vulnerable, the surrendered aspect. So interestingly enough, we've been talking about surrender this entire call. That piece, that access to surrender actually comes from our feminine side for all of us. Our emotionality comes from our feminine side. And yet we live in a society that shames and judges the feminine in all of us at a great level. And so these very things that we need to succeed in love are often shamed and conditioned out of us. So we have to learn to dance with vulnerability, because vulnerability is at the heart of intimacy. Intimacy being into me you see, but first into me I see. And then eventually we get to into me you are. We can't see where one ends and the other begins. But we need this space, this capacity to develop our emotional language, our capacity to not be able to control what happens in our vulnerability, but we trust ourselves enough that even though we can't control the other person's response, we know we'll be okay. And then there is the navigating of the conflicts, the soul friction, and how we do that in a way so that conflict becomes communion.
So I'm listening to you, and I am hearing between the lines a story that the crisis before each of you listening is to take you from the wounds and unconsciousness of how you were raised and how you engaged in the world, and to bring, right, so we put on all of our masks,
Yes.
to shed the masks so that you're authentic. We protect ourselves because of whatever harm we felt was done to us. And so the vulnerable, the get naked, get emotionally naked, and then the surrender, which is so opposite of I need to control, I need to take care of, I need to manage. And so I'm just like authenticity, vulnerability, surrender. I could imagine that somebody is going, that's scary as all hell. And hopefully there are some people on the line who are going, I think I'm heading in that direction. That's actually exciting and enticing and sounds delicious, but
Yes.
it could be equally as scary.
Probably more so. I think the excitement, but the terror can shut us down. The terror shuts us down. And so I feel like there's something I want to name really quickly, and then I want to come back to this terror piece. And the thing that I want to name is that in that ecstatic ecstasy, we've all touched best evers in different places in our lives. Often we think of that sexually, but we can't plan for a best ever. We didn't know we were going into lovemaking that had a best ever. We didn't know we were sitting down with a sunrise that would feel like the best ever. We didn't know we were going to go into a conversation with the kids in the kitchen and feel the greatest connection we've ever felt with them. We cannot plan for a best ever, but we all have thousands of best ever, probably millions, like infinite capacity for best evers. And we can't control that. And so what happens here in the middle that you're pointing at, that where we go, hell no, I'm not doing that. I don't have that capacity. I can't let go. I live my life. If we're talking highly successful people, many times they have been the ones that have built that success on feeling like they were in control. And so this is massively confronting what we are talking about. This is not simple stuff. And so we need to take literally not just baby steps, but baby steps. Fear needs tenderness. Fear needs affirmation, but and validation, but not indulgence. If we indulge it, we're stuck in the fear. But if we're with it, we can move beyond it. So we have to find what is that next tiny fraction of a step that we can take. And if we string together, there was another gentleman on our call yesterday that said, stringing together these baby steps has blown my mind. These weren't his exact words, but it was the effect of what he was saying, blown my mind of what's possible in just under 2 years. So the baby steps, wherever you are right now, start there. And don't try to jump too big, because when we try to jump too big, we go backwards. We shut down. So tiny is enough. And then string that together with another tiny bit and another tiny bit. And we will go places we never imagined we could go.
And when you get there, the journey makes so much sense, doesn't it?
Oh my God, yes. We look back and say, wow, I can see all the pieces.
I am a long way post-divorce, and I had like every possible miserable thing happen to me, and like, why, God? And now I sit here and I'm like, the vast array of human beings I've been able to support, because not only do I see you and hear you, but I've experienced some version of that. And there's something about that. Like so many clients will say to me, I have a great therapist, but it's all theoretical, and he or she's actually never walked this path. And then I talk to you, and in moments, I know, like at the core of my being. And then I look at the challenges that my children have had, being raised by a disordered dad and whatever came out of that, and then coming alongside them and now seeing the promise of their lives as they walk that path. And in the middle of it, you want to harm the other person, you want to protect your kids, you want to resist, you want to hold, you want to control. And it's like every ounce of your mama bear or papa bear is to do that. And yet that holding it loosely and trusting in the unfolding and trusting that each and every one of us will get to a point. I'm so beyond excited about my life at this point. And has it been a little bit of hell getting here? Yeah, on a number of seasons. I've had a number of hellacious seasons. And I am so completely certain, Joanna, that anything that has and anything that will happen to me is absolutely for me, even if I won't be able to see it in the moment. We don't have to see it in the moment if we could have that leap of faith. And I was listening to a college graduation talk. I'm going to forget the fellow's name. And he said, if we can simply trust that the universe is for us and that we don't have to worry about or try and control what is the universe is to control, that we just need to walk our walk and honor ourself and our authenticity and our vulnerability. It was so beautifully said. He said, then everything is going to unfold because the universe is kind and loving and for you.
Yes. And my 25 years on this journey has been about that through and through. But I think the thing that I want to say is I'm 10,000% in agreement. And I also think that it's hard. And that's the thing, is that to remember, we know this. You and I have been on these paths for a long time. And most of the people listening are probably fairly new on that path. And so it's taken me a long time, and I still have to step back and go, oh, wait, I turn it over. Oh, wait, I'm not in control. I had one of my mentors where we were talking about divine navigation, and she said, you're doing Joanna navigation. This is not about divine navigation. And I was like, uh-huh, yep, I am. Okay, yes. And so to know that turning our lives over, trusting that I'm not the victim, which was one of my patterns. I am not the victim of this life. Life is not doing things to me. That all that all of this is actually in alignment for my greatest good and the greatest good of all of those around me. With that being said, not every person listening to this is going to become a love or a relationship facilitator or coach. And so I want to say, whatever you're going through, it's pointing you to your soul's greatest expression and your soul's greatest contribution. And it's not necessarily going to look like our past. It might be to take a stand for something that's meaningful for you. But I find that through our greatest pain, we discover who we are and what we're meant to give in the world. And so I also want to honor that this is hard. We don't just go, oh yeah, it's all happening for me, when it feels like it sucks on every level.
100%.
But to know that we're on that path, to know, well, what if it was okay? And that maybe, just maybe, there is something profound that will come through this. I'll lean back on the best ever concept, the best ever expression of ourselves that we could not have gotten to without the pain that we are going through in the moment.
I so agree with you. And every now and again, someone's like, I don't want to hear that, Karen. I
Yep.
don't want to hear that all of my pain and misery is for me. One of the things that I held on to, even in the thick of everything, was I need to do this differently because the generational chains just go back too far. And my little babies, my little pumpkins, I want to do anything and everything that I can. And I think that there was a point where I wasn't in self-love and self-commitment. I was still very much in abandonment, but I could stretch and do the right thing, if not for myself, for my children. And I think a lot of us are there, where it's like you have so many years of codependence and you're not even on the list, that when you get to this point, you may not be ready to do it for you. But when you think about if you have children, that your behavior is going to energetically change everything going forward. And it's such the ripple effect, not just to our children, but especially to our children, grandchildren, great grandchildren, the ripple effect of the work that is done through difficulty and crisis pays dividends for generations to come.
Huge dividends, huge dividends.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So important. So if not for us, find it for someone else.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm loving this conversation. I want to invite you to share anything else that I'm not thinking to ask before we tell the audience how they can find you and your gift.
Thank you for that. I want to really, I think what I'm drawn to speak about is possibility, and it really dovetails with what we were just speaking about. We can't see all the possibilities. And there is an important life force that's living through every listener. Every person on this journey, there's an important life force. And I believe that it is our opportunity and our greatest ecstasy. I'm going to say it that way. And I say ecstasy, but like if we walk our path, we will know the happiness, the joy, the love, the connection, the intimacies that we have sought and sought in ways that often didn't serve. But if we will come home to ourselves, and if we will embrace, we just briefly touched on it, but if we will embrace the masculine and the feminine within ourselves, because so often it is that aspect of not understanding those dynamics, our sensitivity, our vulnerability on the feminine side, our need for boundaries and certainty on the masculine side, the ability to say yes, say no, to stand for ourselves. Those pieces play a part in both the success of intimate relationships, but the success of ourselves. And I don't like the word success in this context, but the fulfillment, the joy, the happiness of ourselves. And we need, all of us, powerful, successful masculine being, powerful, successful feminine being, and everything in between. We need to develop the capacity to feel and to stand true. And those in union within us and between us will create the greatest relationships.
It's beautiful. Before we got on the call today, we were talking about our mornings. I was sharing how my 2 dogs run joyfully through the shore and bring smiles to everyone's face. And as you were just talking about trusting the universe, and I think about not just my relationships, but even my work and connections and meeting people like you, and like all of the different ways that there's just delight and joy and possibility and shared energy and connection. It comes in so many different shapes and sizes. And it's a journey, right? It's like, if you could, and I'm speaking to the listener, if you could not judge yourself, that's the first thing. Like if you could just start noticing and diminishing your judgment and looking at yourself the way that you look at your children, the way that you look at your BFF, and with that love and kindness, it's going to open something and show you the path. And for those who have spent so many years in these hard relationships where have been judged and blamed and condemned, and you've put up a steel wall to just try and protect yourself, these are the safe spaces for beginning to dismantle those walls and come home to who you were meant to be and all of the beauty that is with that. And I would love if you would share, Joanna, how you work with people and how they can find you and learn more about the work that you do.
Absolutely, absolutely. And really what you just said, the safe spaces and the ways that we can begin to just lower that wall a fraction, because we're not going to drop that whole wall, nor should we. drop that whole a wall at once. But the courage to just say, I'm willing to consider dropping the wall is all we need. It's all we need. I'm willing to consider that there's another possibility.
That's a perfect example of a fraction of a fraction of a step.
Exactly. Exactly.
Beautiful.
And it's all it takes. It's all it takes. And so I really hold people through a variety of ways. And there are several retreats that people can come and attend for the weekend. And they're openings. There's one around sexuality. There's one around our heart and relating. There's another one around masculine and feminine dynamics. When someone wants to dive deeper, we have a whole program series and a community of people that are dancing in this dance of authenticity, intimacy, and ecstasy, and how they create those breathtaking lives. And of course, then there are opportunities where I work with people privately. And in a few cases, most of our work is in the bigger spaces. But occasionally, when there's that core call, which is true for some, they need a private space. And so that is also available. And what really matters to me is that we find the right path and the right space for each individual. And sometimes that's a toe dip of go to the website, which is ecstaticintimacy.com, and check out a couple of articles. Maybe it's a toe dip of have a private conversation. Maybe it's a little bit bigger. I'm gonna stick my leg in and I'm gonna go to a retreat. But whatever it is, find, or wherever that is, find that path where you can take the next fraction of a step, because it will lead you to places that you can't begin to imagine right now. We never imagined the best ever before it happened. That's by definition. We cannot know our own ecstasy until we find it. Until it finds us is actually a more accurate statement. But we had to be available for it to find us.
Beautiful. Do you have something that I could post in the show notes, an article or something a little bit more about the masculine, feminine? Because it's new for me. Had a couple of people come on and scratch the surface, but for the listener who's like, I want to know more about that. Do you have something for us?
I do actually. Something that I just put together because that question's been coming up more and more. I literally just put it together. There's a couple of different things, but this is the one that I think is of most service, and why we created it just in the last couple of weeks is an ebook and the practical approaches to masculine feminine dynamics. And there's several articles in that ebook along with several other resource links. So I'm happy to get you a link for the listeners to be able to download that ebook and really begin to explore some of the critical, practical impacts and dynamics of that within ourselves and between ourselves in relationship.
I appreciate that. So it's in the show notes. You can check it out there and grab that. Please go to Joanna's website, schedule a call if that's what calls to you, learn about her different offerings. And if this is speaking to you, dive in and head toward your own beautiful ecstasy. I so appreciate you coming and speaking to us and sharing your incredible gifts with us today, Joanna.
Thank you, Karen. Just to sit in this space that's so tender. Divorce is a tender, vulnerable time. It's a time of uncertainty, and it's a time that deserves great care and great tenderness. And the emergence from that is so powerful. So thank you for creating the space for this conversation.
You're welcome. And as usual, we'll be back real soon with another episode. You have a beautiful day. Thanks, Joanna.
Thank you.